from this Lockman well. We have plenty of producing oil from it.
Probably not.
We have plenty of producing gas from it.
Probably not.
Are you the witness we talked to about the pressure monitors and the testing integrity and the casing and the tubing, or is somebody else going to address that?
Alan knows that better than thank you.
I don't believe I've got any more questions for Mr. Cowell.
Commissioner? Mr. Cowell, I'd like to ask a couple questions about existing wells that have been plugged in the dam. The legal testimony is that you would be dependent on the commission to have overseen the proper plugging of management of the wells.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit about the dynamics of pressurized water in those formations? What the concern would be with an existing well?
See, I'm not sure I understand the question.
You have shown on some maps where some existing wells have been, and just like that
They're plugged in, abandoned properly, yeah.
And how does one address, or why is that a problem? Why should we be concerned about?
Okay. Thank you. I understand the question. Because if you didn't have the correct cement plugs isolating the various aquifers in the different wellbores, if the cement and the steel that we have our fluid going down, if all those things failed, if 2 or 3 layers of cement and 2 or 3 layers of steel failed, and the disposal water got outside of that, it could migrate to some other place. And if you didn't have the other wellbores correctly cemented, then there's a chance that you could enter that wellbore. So relying upon the other wells to be completed and plugging the band properly is an important thing.
So the idea would be that the other wells, if they are abandoned properly, cemented off, that
also
your pressurized fluid could enter those.
That's right. That also minimizes and protects the aquifer from that side.
There were some questions about trucking and who would license those and in your control. At this point, that isn't part of your application, that you would be trucking the water in.
Correct, and that's not part of our business plan at all. We're really an oil and gas exploration company, and this happened to be a well bore that we own, and it was producing oil, and it still produces a little bit of oil, but we owned it, and if we had to go and re-drill this well in this location, it would cost us $1.5 million. And we wouldn't know for sure that these sands were down there until we drilled them. But the well was drilled, it produced, and now it's become sub-economic. And upon examining, what's the value of this? It's incredibly valuable because it has these disposal zones that just jumped out and said, inject into us, because we're far from the aquifers and we have a lot of capability to accept the oil, and we can do it relatively low pressures and take a lot of it. And it's just a very environmentally sound way to dispose of disposal.
A couple of questions about water releasing. So I think your testimony was the overall output does not exist at that point.
That's correct.
So is there a possibility that pressurized water can migrate to the overall?
I'd say the chances are slim and none, because the very closest is over 20 miles away. So that kind of migration behind, when it's already contained behind several layers of cement and steel, is really unlikely, because if there was a leak or something, our pressure maintenance, pressure gauges would notify that right away, and we'd stop immediately. So if there was a lack of containment, it would stop immediately. So there's virtually no chance it ever reaches the wall at 20 miles away.
In regard to the water that trucks would bring in, maybe one of the other witnesses would be the person that asked this. What kind of monitoring would take place of the type of water that was being brought to your site?
We have done a water analysis of silo fuel water, and we found out what kind of total dissolved solids are typical from that field, and it's roughly 30,000 parts per million total dissolved solids.
Is that something that you would monitor when trucks come to your facility?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't think I have any more questions on this.
Mr. Johnson originally had his hand up to ask a question.
Oh, I just, my question was, you talked about the disposal zone at approximately 6,000 feet. That's good. The only thing that kind of bothers me, what percent of chance would there be that the casing above that spot would be bad? After 17 years in the ground, that casing could be getting kind of thin, and you have to use pressure to inject that. So, my question is this: what percent chance would there be of say a pinhole developing in the side of the casing in the area of the aquifer? What kind of a guarantee could you put on that?
Well, you know, that's a good question, and I don't think you can really put a percentage on it. Alan will talk more about this, but we had to pressurize the test, the tubing, or the casing, and I think we had a minimally test of 300 PSI, but I think we tested it up to 2,000 times PSI, almost 7 times what was required, because it's important. That's an important thing to make sure that the mechanical integrity of that pipe is in good shape, and we did. We tested 7 times what was required, and how long did we leave it overnight? 15 minutes. It pressured up for 15 minutes at that high PSI and didn't leak off a bit. So it passed with flying colors. It's in good shape. But what's the kind of percentage? I can't put it.
Yeah, that was my question. How long would that last? I mean,
Yeah.
you have no way to know if it could blow out in 6 months, or maybe it'd last for 20 years. You don't know that.
That's right. I think what we can say is that if there is a leak or a break, we will know right away. And we'll stop injecting.
But if you did know that and you found out there was a leak, by then you already have a problem because you have some spill out of the casing. maybe
It,
two
it
like.
would be so minimal, it'd be contained inside, inside our building.
Okay.
It's not gonna take 6 months to figure that out.
We'll cover the well construction.
This is Andy's expertise, he can speak to it, thank you, Andy.
At the bottom of the concrete, 600 feet, is that correct?
At the bottom of the surface casing?
Okay, you've got your casing, 600 feet, right? What is the pressure at the bottom of 600 feet?
240 PSI.
240 psi.
That's a, like 4.3, 4.4. 3,
That's at what pressure, sir? What initial pressure are you starting with at the surface?
I don't know the answer to that. Andy's our engineer, who can answer that.
We would estimate the well would be taking fluid, the pressure is dependent on the rate at which we're injecting, and so we won't be sure what the injection pressure will be until we start injecting. I would estimate less than 1,000 PSI for injection pressure. And I can get into it in well construction, how that's contained and monitored.
What type of solids were you talking about when you were talking about the water? You said like 0.20% solid. What kind of solids are they?
In the produced water, you have different salts, total dissolved solids. They're salts. They're sodium, chloride, chlorine, sodium chloride salt. That's probably potassium. Commonly dissolved salts that are in all waters. And you measure those. You can tell what the concentrations are, and that's what makes up seawater, for example.
You said that you tested the water at the silo site. Then in 10,000 gallons, in 10 million gallons, is it going to test the same as that first test, or will it change after you have pumped that much water out?
That's a good question. My first reaction to that is I think it's going to be fairly consistent. The water that is in silo field has been there for millions of years, and that's what's pushing the oil out. And as you produce the oil, a certain amount of water comes with it. But I think the general consistency of that water is going to be fairly consistent.
Will you do further testing to be sure that it is consistent and near to that first test?
Yes, I think we'll probably be doing tests from every different source that comes to us, so that we have an idea of what the constituency of each of the sources of the water is.
So how often will you do that? So how many truckloads or how many barrels, how often will that be done?
That's a good question. Maybe my associate here, that water expert, could help me with that.
It'll just be periodic, and there's no reason to do one every load or
No, but
every other load, but we'll do it periodic.
every once in a while, or will there be a standard?
Yes.
There will be a standard,
A standard is one respect.
as in every million barrels or every 10,000
We do it
barrels?
every 6 months. And
Every 6 months, so that we would know that that would be available for us to see.
I think that's a good thing. It's a good point. I think it's a procedure we ought to do regularly. I agree with that.
I think you should.
Yeah, I agree.
Which way does water flow in our country?
Which way does it flow?
Yes, sir. underground?
It flows to the lowest pressure, whatever direction that might be.
It flows from the northwest to the southeast.
And that's what's depicted on the cross section that I had. It flows to the outcrop, and it goes down, and then it flows south and east. That's right.
What's south and east of there?
Excuse me?
What is south and east of there? What zone?
Well, you want me to say Ogallala?
That's what it is.
The Ogallala, it is to the east of us on the surface. If you look at the cross section, if you see this one here?
Yes.
We have it.
You can see where the aurifery in blue, upper left-hand corner, and you can see the brule. You can see where they're recharged, and they flow down and then out south to east. But you can see the great separation between the Sundance and the spearfish and the Ogallala. Yellow's at the top, and then our spearfish injection zones are clear at the bottom, over a mile. So we're not, you know, we're not going to be drilling through the Ogallala. The well's already drilled, but we're not going to. Our wellbore doesn't penetrate the Ogallala. There are some zones here. We've talked about those, and we're going to protect those too, because that is fresh water. That's the whole idea.
Any other questions?
I guess I would ask one of your question, Mr. Chairman, conflict question. Do you own this Lockhart 3,000? What is your, are you leasing it? Do you own it? The one that you're requesting be converted into a disposal?
Yeah, Terex Energy owns the
How
well.
long have you owned it?
About a year.
Who did you acquire from?
Allen's Pumping Service,
They're out of.
Kimball, Nebraska.
You have not owned the well to produce oil and gas.
Well, we did.
You did.
We have produced.
So when you
oil.
bought it, it was producing.
That's right.
All right.
And it's still producing. We haven't.
It's just not economic.
Abandoned it. It produces intermittently.
It's just not economic.
Oh, you know what? I misspoke. Sorry, not the Lockyer well. I was thinking of the one in southeast of the Bird Corner well. Excuse me. It's not the Lockyer. It's not producing. I misspoke. Sorry.
And it never produced since you owned it, or did it?
That's correct. Yeah.
Never.
Correct.